Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. My name is Margaret Romero. I'm a Columbia-trained functional medicine nurse practitioner, and here I uncover the truth behind chronic illness so that you can finally heal. I'm a women's health and hormone expert and love empowering women to finally live their life fully and powerfully through optimal health. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. Welcome back to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero. And in case you have not noticed, the cover picture has changed as well as the intro. And so I just felt like I wanted to, just have a new look and a little bit of a different vibe. Though the information will still be the same, it's still going to be based on functional medicine, healthy living. And I'm just excited because I'm also coming out with one new aspect to this podcast, and that is going to be video. So you'll be seeing it on YouTube as well as on Instagram. You'll be seeing snippets there. So I'm so excited for that. I've been wanting to do this for a while, so finally I am doing it. So this week we have a new guest, Debbie Emick. Now let me tell you, this woman, who is also an author, has gone through so many health issues that she was able to overcome. I mean, she has a history of autoimmune issues as well as epilepsy and mixed connective tissue disease and pulmonary hypertension. I mean, the list goes on. And the best thing about this story is that she was able to overcome it. And one of the things that she did was she dealt with her trauma. And I think that that's really an important part to so many people's chronic illness, is dealing with the past and dealing with trauma. And I know that's a hard thing to do, but she talks about her story so beautifully. And I would love for you to just listen in and see so many things that she's gone through, she was able to overcome. And I know for those of you who listen, who follow me because of my own history of lupus or your love of functional medicine, because that was what I did in order to overcome the lupus. But also she really shines a light on the need to deal with trauma. So without further ado, let's go on to her story. You are listening to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and today I have Debbie Emick, and we are going to be talking all about trauma and autoimmune issues. Debbie, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Margaret. It is completely my pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to the great conversation.
Yeah. I would love to hear about your story. It sounds I read a snippet of your bio, and it just sounds like you've been through so much, and with autoimmune issues. Please share with us everything that's kind of happened before you got to the conclusion of what actually helped you. Well, I'd love to start there. Yeah.
Yeah. So about 10 years ago, I started going down the road of autoimmune disease discovery and diagnosis, and took a few years and some trial and error to decide to do what I could to control my health as well. There was one point with my first rheumatologist that I was taking like 9 different prescriptions 3 times a day and feeling worse, really, essentially, than before I went. And so felt empowered to change doctors, and those doctors helped me really dig into what was truly going on rather than just kind of like throwing treatments or prescriptions at it. And eventually I decided to work on my food and did the things recommended there. So like trying to limit inflammatory foods and discover some allergies that I had and eliminate those foods, and really worked on refining what I was eating. And then worked on my fitness, continuing to stay active, um, continuing to use my body to help it support itself. And still kept searching for ways to get better, because I still was feeling physical pain in my body and struggling in that way. And so then I started working on supplements, trying to replace things in my body that were lacking, or see what I might be able to take in that way. And
Sure.
finally, I had a conversation with my rheumatologist, and she said, "It's too bad you have to work," which really got me thinking about work and stress and whether or not I had to work, and decided to leave my job to eliminate the stress of my job, thinking, oh, this will be the thing, like the magic bullet.
Right.
This is going to be the final thing that solves everything. And it wasn't until after I had left my job, thought I had done everything to help myself heal, and was I in the place I thought I wanted to be most, at home, being a wife and a mom, and having the time to take care of myself. That's when I found myself in this really low, deep, dark place. And I was still in pain, right? And thinking I was doing everything I could do to control it. And it was actually by seeing myself in that dark place, deciding I never wanted to go back there, and sort of like clawing myself out of there, that I found this connection to my own emotions, some repressed emotions from the past, some trauma I had never dealt with, sort of releasing those, that helped me also heal my body physically and release some of the pain in my body as well.
Okay. Well, you know what? Can you tell us like some of your diagnosis from,
Sure.
yeah, let's
Yeah.
start I just want to know all the things that you were struggling with at the time.
Sure. So I have mixed connective tissue disease. I show markers for mixed connective tissue disease. So for me, it's a combination of lupus and something called relapsing polychondritis, which specifically attacks cartilage, and often attacks cartilage in people's noses, the bridge of their nose, and in their ears. And in me, it had attacked my lungs silently, the cartilage in my trachea and bronchioles. And so by the time this was discovered, it was found that I have severe collapse in my lungs. And that was kind of the first very dramatic, I would say, diagnosis, where pulmonologists were saying I would need to get stents in my lungs. And when you kind of start going down that road, you see the problems that arise from that as well. And so, yeah, a lot of things surrounding that. And then just a few years ago, I was actually diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension, which is high blood pressure in the lungs, but can lead to fairly quickly to heart failure. And so those are the big diagnoses that I've had. I have some things that often accompany, like lupus or autoimmune diseases like Raynaud's, and those kinds of things as well.
Oh, and how old were you when all of this started happening?
So I was about 32 when I just couldn't ignore what was going on with me anymore. I believe there were like whispers before that. There were some weird things that showed up in my blood work when I had my first daughter, that I just, after you have a child, I didn't have the energy or the time or the desire to really address my own health at that time. I was really focused on my daughter. And then after I had my second daughter, I was around 32. She was about 6 months to a year old when the pain just got so bad that, like, I would try to mow the lawn that summer, and afterwards I couldn't push a shopping cart because the pain in my wrists and hands and elbows and shoulders was so severe that I couldn't do like basic functions like that. Yeah, so about 32, I think.
And so it began then, but when did the whispers happen? Because that happens for
Yeah.
sometimes the majority of us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is a pretty good body of evidence out there too that uh, many people that tend toward these kinds of diseases and illnesses have sort of similar personalities, right? Like people pleasers, go-getters, work hard, push through whatever they're going through. And I would say my life sort of followed that plan, just out of my own coping skills. I had sort of surrounded myself in like these layers of protection of perfectionism and people pleasing. And because of that, I do think I ignored a lot of whispers. So that probably went on for quite a while, maybe like 5 years before, 6 years, maybe a little more, just little things that I ignored, um, mostly being tired, not understanding, like a cycle of feeling ill and worn down, and then I could, go back and be fine. That kind of stuff. And like I said, there were definitely some weird things that came through my blood work that I just chose to ignore and not really address.
Sure. Sure. I mean, was it, can you share what some of those things that came up were?
Yeah, so I don't honestly know what came up the first time. I'm assuming it was a positive ANA. It was just a doctor that came through the hospital after I had my daughter, I'm sorry, that asked me if I had lupus. And I said no, and we kind of had a conversation about that, and I never really addressed it. When I went back to the doctor with my uh, second daughter after I had had her, and I was having pretty severe hip pain. I had been running quite a bit, and I had to stop running. Like I said, I had trouble hiking. We like to hike in the mountains, and I had to stop doing that. I couldn't mow the lawn anymore. Otherwise, I couldn't go to the grocery store. And when I went to her, she was a good doctor that I trusted, but I told you I was 31, 32, and she told me, oh, you're probably just aging. It's maybe bursitis in your hip. And so this kind of goes, I think, with the typical autoimmune diagnosis, right? Where it's like sort of dismissed. I looked pretty healthy on the outside, but I did have a positive ANA. And so she referred me to my first rheumatologist based on that, who did further blood work. And then there was something called an RNP, which is just another marker. And that's the one that signals mixed connective tissue disease. So I think those were the two big ones, that got attention of people and then sort of allowed for further testing and digging into what was going on.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's so common for many years to go by before a diagnosis is made. And two, that someone can very easily brush off symptoms. I think it happens, I believe, more women than men. For example, when women complain of fatigue or they're just not feeling right, or let's just say it's due to hormones, but they're sort of just given some antidepressants or birth control, and nothing's really ever fully investigated, or lab work is rarely done. And it's a cycle. And then women just for years suffer in silence with symptoms that could have been, just low progesterone or a woman going through perimenopause. And instead they're being put on antidepressants, which I find to be so, it just angers me when I hear this, because I still hear this. This isn't something that's happened many years ago. It's still happening.
Right.
To the detriment of women.
Yeah, I would definitely affirm what you're saying in that I agree it does go on. And I think many patients are dismissed when they go to the doctor like that, like maybe it's this or just try this. But I would also empower people who are listening, like two lessons I've learned, and this is my hindsight view, which is easier than when you're in the moment of feeling pain or severe fatigue, or just like, I don't know what's going on with me, but it doesn't feel right. But one is that there are so many doctors out there. And this was a lesson I had to learn the hard way multiple times. But my first rheumatologist really didn't want to get to the bottom of what was going on with me. He just wanted to go through the course of drugs that you commonly go through, right? And so he diagnosed me with rheumatoid arthritis, which I believe, now was a misdiagnosis. And then he just started me on the course of drugs to see which ones would work. And so, I mean, my first step to really healing was finding a different doctor. And
Sure.
I know now there are so many doctors out there, and it's up to us to find the one that hears us and sees us and is an okay match with us, and that we can, gain better health from. So that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would tell people that are really looking for a diagnosis or answers is, they're really, getting a diagnosis is not an answer to your health problems in and of itself. And so it doesn't really lead to something better. It's like we need to take control of what we can now. We need to feel empowered to gain health now. And we don't always find those answers in a diagnosis or from a doctor. I mean, I still have doctors. I still take a couple of prescriptions, and I know that those are helping my body, be okay and feel better. And I feel good about that. But at the same time, being diagnosed with something was not a cure or an answer. For a long time, it led to more dis-ease in my body or more issues, just trying different drugs and medications. Those were not the answer. They did not necessarily help. And so I would just encourage anyone that's out there looking for that to just know that whether you have a diagnosis or not, it really, it doesn't matter necessarily. It won't lead to true health until you're able to take your own power back, and kind of search for the answers that you seek and do what you can in your own life to heal yourself as well.
Absolutely. So what would you say so you're going through all of these, you're seeing the rheumatologist, they're trying you on some meds. When was it that you actually started you found a new doctor, and then you proceeded to try the meds, or did you try other avenues?
Okay. Yeah. So when I switched rheumatologists right away, I had been on steroids for a really long time. And she felt that I was misdiagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So she essentially took me off almost all of my medications except for Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine sulfate, which kind of takes a while to build up in your system and has very low toxicity. And so she did that so that she could kind of see how this was presenting in my body without all of these medications. And then she started to slowly add back what was needed. And so she changed the immunosuppressant I was on. And once my body adjusted to not being on the steroids, I think, that was much better for my long-term health than being on steroids for an extended amount of time. But she never really empowered me in the way of like, if you really work on your food, you'll get better. Or if you do this, you might get better. It was still this feeling of like, this is a disease in your body that you can't really control on your own, and it's going to run its course. So it was only, it was really like my own intuition and guidance and the support of my husband or other people around me that allowed me to start trying more natural things. And so the first natural thing was working on my food, and then making sure that I could support my body and my health as much as I could by like getting enough rest and that kind of routine. And then making sure that I continued to exercise and those kinds of things. So this was more like, man, I don't want to keep getting worse. What could I do to maybe prolong my health as much as I can? But for the most part, my medical doctors didn't really empower me to do that. They were very ingrained in the, like, this is the diagnosis, the disease, these are the medications, and this is probably what will happen long term in the future. And so it was just kind of trial and error on my part, working on those things. In retrospect, I think all of that definitely helps my immune system function properly, my mental health, which helps my immune system. Eventually, when I still was having trouble and feeling pain and working on supplements and learning about the digestive system and what effect it might have, I was seeking some help with finding a probiotic, and I went to a chiropractor. And she did some somatic work on me. So she calls herself a chiropractor. I live in a really rural area of Colorado. That's an accessible term. She does do chiropractic work, but in retrospect, what she did with me was more like some somatic or healing type work. And it opened up this idea in me that some of this pain being held in my body was related to my mental health. And so that is kind of what empowered me to go down that road in working on some past trauma, some repressed emotions. And that really took me down a whole other path of healing. And surprisingly, as I healed that part of myself, physical pain also left my body. And I felt healthy physically as well.
That's amazing. How long did that take?
Oh gosh, it's not quick. Like every time I tried something, I thought this will be the magic bullet. This is what will finally fix it. And then, there was another thing to do after that and another thing. But I would say I started working through that about 3 years ago. And it wasn't fast, but it was, it was a year to really get through the emotions that I had just been repressing. And then maybe another year of really journaling and learning about calming my nervous system and moving on from that. And so, yeah, there's really no arriving maybe. I'm still a work in progress working through that, but it's been a few years since I found myself in a really deep, dark place, and I've been working through coming out of that.
That's great. So you started seeing the chiropractor, and then did she, aside from working with you with somatically, did she also do testing and check, did she do kinesiology? Did she put you on supplements, or what was her approach?
Yeah. So at the same time that she was kind of helping me emotionally, we were working on healing my gut. So I think what she would call leaky gut, working on being able to do that, which made a big difference, I'm sure, with my health too. So she was doing, those typical like functional type medicine things at the same time that she was doing some, I think somatic work is the best way to describe it. Just helping me identify some maybe places in my body that I was holding these emotions and being able to get to the core of that and release that. So those actual moments, that really only took a few visits and a few times, but then it took my own persistence and work after that to sort of work through that, become open with it, not feel ashamed, just become really real and let go of like the perfectionism and people pleasing that I had been sort of surrounding myself with.
Okay. So now what she was working on with you, it was all past trauma. Was it from like a childhood? Was it something you uncovered as an adult?
Yeah. So essentially, I think, now getting to the root of it, working through some abandonment that went on when I was around 11 years old and then went on for years after that. And so I was working through a time in my life when my parents split up, and there were some alcoholic stepfathers that came in, and the trauma that brought on with their behavior and their lifestyle. And
Sure.
then there were several years in there where I lived in the basements of friends' house, and I didn't live with or have a lot of contact with either of my parents. And these were things that I had just sort of, I guess, superficially coded in positivity, and like, I'm a positive person, I forgive and move on. I've moved on past this, when truthfully, it was all fairly superficial, and I had never truly processed any of that, or I had sort of hidden it away, right? I'd never really talked about it with anyone. And so I created like this big well of shame around it, most likely. And so it was kind of getting to the core of that, and then actually letting myself feel and experience those emotions, and then working on getting rid of the shame and getting rid of these layers of protection I had surrounded myself in, keeping people at arm's length because I didn't trust them.
Sure.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm like rabbit trailing all over here, but that was kind of
No.
the essence of the work that I had to do.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that that's a really big part of healing, is obviously not only the physical healing, but the emotional healing as well. And there's so much trauma and some things that we may not even think is trauma, that we may have experienced as a child that we may or may not remember necessarily. And there was something I read recently. I don't want to say this in the wrong way, but there was something I read just recently that said that the majority of, was it about alcoholic fathers? It said that the majority of women who have autoimmune conditions have a known traumatic experience that's happened in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was something else I read that said who've had a parent, one or both parents, who have been alcoholics, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It was either alcoholics and or drug use. And I just thought that was really interesting, because sometimes you don't really, I mean, as a functional medicine provider, I do really go in depth in my initial consults to ask, how was childhood? What was it like growing up? And were your parents supportive? And even in my intake, there's a question about parents and how you felt about them. And sometimes there are really, pretty normal upbringings, and a lot of the times there's something that happened to them as a child. So it's interesting to note that you as well went through something traumatic. How old were you around that time when all of that was happening? Were you a teen or were you younger?
Yeah, so that really started around the age of 11 or so, and continued through high school until I went to college and was able to sort of make my own life and try and figure things out, for myself. But I think I just want to say, like, how lucky your patients are that you do that, and how funny it is now to me in retrospect to not see that relationship between the emotional part of myself and the physical part of myself. And now, having read, for anyone in your community that's listening and feels like in the same space, if you've read Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, or Gabor Mate's When the Body Says No, there is a huge body of research out there that supports these types of things, and coping mechanisms, personalities, and repressed emotions and trauma, what that does to your nervous system, and then in turn that the effect your nervous system has on on the chemical makeup and hormonal makeup of your body and the long-term effects of that. And so anyone that's wanting to learn more or dig in, I would encourage them to read, those authors and those books. And at the same time, that I'm trying to work on healing myself emotionally, being surprised that it helped heal me physically. I also read a book called Expressive Writing, and it talks about the benefits of journaling, and how you can use journaling to heal. And so, but yeah, I would say that your patients are lucky to have you talk about that. And that's something that Gabor Mate talks about, that like doctors, medical doctors, rheumatologists, when they're doing their intake, these are questions they should be asking. We can't really address the whole patient if we don't address the emotional side of the patient, not just the physical side of the patient.
Exactly. So. Yeah. So important. It's really the key. And I think you can throw as much medication at someone and you can do all the blood tests, but when you're not really focusing on potential traumas that have happened or occurred as a child or an adult, then you can't fully heal on a deep level. So yeah, thank you for that. I'll put both of those books in the show notes as well.
Cool. Great. People. Yeah.
Yeah, and even the way people with any sort of illness or chronic illness or cancer, anything. It could even be you not liking the way you look in a particular dress, anything. And you say something like, "Oh, I hate this about my body," or if you're feeling like a lot of pain, or you're just having like excruciating and swollen joints that day, and you're just kind of hating on your body, or you're saying things to your body like, "Why are you doing this to me? I hate you," or "Why?" Anything. I mean, it could be about your weight or how you look or anything, right? And when someone hates their body, their ability to heal their body is not possible.
Yeah, so true. Like what I know now is our body doesn't know the difference between the truth and not the truth. It only knows what we tell ourselves, right? And so it doesn't matter if a threat is real or a threat is perceived. Our nervous system does not know the difference. So it will react as though it is a real threat. And maybe it's just us trying to hurry and get out of the house really fast and getting our nervous system all riled up over it. But it sees it the same way as any threat. And so, yeah, the more we can become aware of the voices that are going on inside ourselves and detach from those, I think the more we can do to change those stories we tell ourselves and what the voice is saying. And so the first step is awareness, right? And then we can detach and eventually know, like, I am not my body even. I am not my pain. I am not my diagnosis or diagnoses. I am not my car, the same way that I'm not my car or my house, or I am not that. I am this soul that's underneath all of that, inside of that. And so I am not that voice in my head that often is telling me lies that aren't true because it's afraid or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that's so good. That's so true. I just encourage anyone to just listen, become aware of what that voice is saying, and detach from that, not identify with it.
Yes. I mean, just so everyone knows that all the words that you speak, your cells are eavesdropping on your thoughts. Have you heard that quote before?
No, that's a good one.
Yeah. And so anytime we don't speak lovingly to our bodies, it can hear us. It definitely can hear us. So just think about that if you're hating on your body or you're saying you know, things that aren't positive and encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
So, so basically you started going through all of these symptoms. You saw a bunch of doctors. You found someone new who was using some functional medicine approaches, healing your gut, and then started helping you with some trauma, which was uncovered, and you started working on this, and you still continue to work on it. So today, what would you say is, granted you're still working on it, but would you say that your body feels so much better? Are you still having pain? How do you feel today?
Yeah, I feel very good most of the time. I don't have a lot of physical symptoms anymore, generally. So I feel like I'm doing really well. I would say I still experience fatigue, and occasionally I have some cartilage swelling. Cartilage doesn't have a lot of like nerve endings in it, and so it it's not super painful when the cartilage itself inflames. I can just feel it or see it physically. Um, and so the pain probably that was in my body that I don't experience much anymore was either more like emotional related, like fibromyalgia, or I've just been able to calm my nervous system, and so I don't have as much inflammation. I definitely experience some symptoms if I eat certain foods. I
Sure.
will feel more pain or more inflammation in my body, and so I do try to take care of myself now. I have a good routine, some pretty good um, forms of self-care that if I'm consistent with that, I feel really good. And I think a lot of people out there, diagnosis or not, are tired or feeling sick or hurting or burned out or whatever it is. And so I think that this has really been these obstacles in my life have been my path to feeling good. And I would say on most days I feel as good or better than most people out there. But it's a practice that over time I've learned, and so I get enough sleep, I meditate, I journal, I do affirmations, I take care of my body by what I put into it, I rest when I need to. And I still take some supplements and, like I said, a couple of prescriptions, but for the most part, I'm doing really well. I'm living a very normal, healthy, full life for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love hearing these stories.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And so tell me about this book that's coming out.
Sure. So through my process of healing, like I said, I started learning about the benefits of journaling. And in that book I reference it in my book as well. There's a lot of research in it that shows the correlation between repressed emotions or trauma and lung disease, heart disease, like physical illnesses. And this was all new to me when I was reading it at the time. And I had never really gone to a psychologist, and I had never dealt with it. So instead, I just started journaling and making that a practice. And from that came this process that sort of became a book. And so it goes through this journey that I've been on, trying really hard to heal, and then finally finding these answers between connecting, the mind and body, and learning to release some of those repressed emotions and traumas that I had early in my life. And so I made a book that sort of goes through that process. It has some journaling prompts, and then to try to help the reader also heal and learn and do their own healing journey along with it. And I created a companion journal that goes with that as well for anyone that wants to do their own work as they read it. It's called The Other Side of Perfect, Discovering the mind-body connection to healing chronic illness.
Oh, I love it. And when does it come out?
So February 1st is its official release. I'm not sure when this podcast will be released, but right now it's in pre-sale. Most anywhere you can buy a book, you can find it, or you can go to gobucketyourself.com/books. And if you buy it now before February 1st, you can get that companion journal free if you go to that site. So.
Oh, okay. So go bucket yourself. /.com.
Yep. /books.
Books. Okay.
Yeah.
And then before February 1st, they got the free workbook. Okay. I'll have that in the show notes.
Oh, thank you so much.
Is it a physical book? Is it a Kindle?
Yeah, so it's available in all formats except audio. The audio version will come out after the official release in February. So yeah, you can get it Kindle, hardback, or paperback, and you can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or most any place you find your books, or just by going to gobucketyourself.com/books. We have a link there that'll take you to it and then bring you back so that you can get that free companion journal.
Oh, amazing. Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Margaret. This has been such a nice conversation. I appreciate you giving me the time and space, and I've enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for opening up and sharing your story with us, and share all the things that have worked and not worked, and that, dealing with trauma is definitely something that needs to be incorporated more and more into healing, especially all individuals.
Right.
But I think that I just see chronic illness as being a part of conventional medicine that I don't believe it's addressed in the right way. I guess with conventional medicine, we see chronic illness in a very different way, and it's not about Band-Aids. It's more about really healing on a deep level. And trauma is definitely something that more and more people need to explore, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I've learned that the long, hard way, for sure, but I completely agree with you.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for being here. Have a beautiful rest of your day and enjoy those mountains.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks
Appreciate
so much.
it. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Well, I really hope you enjoy this conversation. I think it's so important to highlight about trauma. And, there was a study that came out that said that, I forget the percentage, it was really high, like 75, 80, 85% of women that were found to have autoimmune issues have a history of trauma as a child. And I just find that so interesting, so true, because I've seen it time and time again in my practice. So Debbie also has a beautiful book called The Other Side of Perfect: Discovering the Mind and Body Connection to Chronic Illness. So she also has a free workbook, and you can head on over to gobucketyourself.com/books. I'm going to have all this information in the show notes for you. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. And I will see you guys all next week. Bye for now.